Here. Okay, I think we're good. So welcome everyone. And again, just so everyone's clear, we're broadcasting this both through our webinar platform, but also on Facebook Live on our Facebook page. So I can see your comments in both places. If you're on the webinar, you should be able to see a little menu at the bottom and a chat option. You can chat me your questions that way. That's kind of the easiest way to do it. I'll probably take your questions more at the end. And then if you're on Facebook Live, you can just chat your questions or comments in the comments. And if you're listening to the recording, we'll also answer those later too. So even if you're not here live, please ask if you've got any questions. My name is Caitlin Saposi-Belknap. I'm Move to Amends National Director. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar of 2019. We hold these webinars. We've been doing this for years, but last year we were kind of sporadic, but this year we're gonna go back to doing this regularly every month. When you signed up to register, you probably saw that we already have most of the schedule for the year. Thanks for tuning in today. We're going to focus on how to get involved in 2019, and I'm going to talk about our plans for the year ahead. And let's see, I guess the one other thing I wanted to just mention is that I live in Sacramento, California. If you want to let me know where you're tuning in from, you're welcome to put that in the comments, either on Facebook or on the webinar. And I do have a question for you as we get started. Just want to have a sense of who is here and what your involvement with Move to Amend is. So if you're on Facebook, you're not going to be able to vote in this poll, but you should be able to see it. What has been your involvement with Move to Amend to date? So none, I'm brand new. I signed the petition and get the emails. I signed the petition and get the emails, and sometimes I take action online. I'm a Move to Amend affiliate volunteer. I'm a Move to Amend affiliate leader. And I am a Move to Amend national leader. So if you're on Facebook, you can answer that in quick typing in the comments. I just kind of want to get a sense of what folks' experience is with Move to Amend, your knowledge about Move to Amend, if you've already been involved. So let's see, it looks like not everyone has voted on the webinar, so I'll give you maybe one more minute or so, 30 seconds. 70% of you have. Hey Sandy, and hey Donald on Facebook. Also, hey Lee, welcome. I'll give you another few seconds to fill in your answer. Looks like most of you have voted. And so we'll say, 5 more seconds. Hurry up and click your answer. Not a hard question. You should be able to do this without too much thought. Let's end the poll here. And I think, I can't tell if you can see it. Oh, there we go. So looks like there's a couple brand new folks. There are several people who are just kind of in the loop. Looks like a number of you take action from time to time, so thanks for that. And there's a few folks who are involved with affiliates, and we've got a couple national folks as well. So welcome to everyone. It's helpful to know that we have quite a mix, and there also will be folks tuning into the recording. So for that reason, I am going to give a little bit of background. Oh wait, actually, I can do it this way. There we go. So first, I'm going to give an overview of Move to Amend, just some background to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then I'll talk about our 2019 projects and some ongoing volunteer opportunities, and then I'm happy to take your questions. Like I said, I am going to try and keep this to an hour, more or less, because Trump is going to be addressing the public in about an hour, and folks might want to tune into that. So, but I'm happy to take questions for as long as needed to kind of cover most things. And there'll also be an opportunity at the end for you to let us know if you'd like a follow-up phone call, and then we'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one too. So let's get started. Move to Amend was started, this is actually our 10-year anniversary, 2019. Folks most of the time think of us as, starting with Citizens United, and we publicly did. However, we officially formed Move to Amend the year before, in the fall, before the decision came down. So the decision was in January 2010. But we formed in the fall of 2009 in preparation for that decision, and we formed as a coalition. At this point now, Move to Amend is a coalition of hundreds of organizations and hundreds of thousands of individuals and what brings us together is our commitment to social and economic justice, ending corporate rule, and building a vibrant democracy that is genuinely accountable to the people, not corporate interests. And let me just pause. I'm sorry. It looks like actually I misunderstood, and the way our webinar system works, it doesn't broadcast the poll on Facebook. So we'll take that into account later, and apologies to the Facebook folks who weren't able to weigh in. But the questions were basically, what's your involvement to date? So feel free to put that in the comments so I can see it if you want to add that. So our goals as this coalition that has a broader agenda of really ending corporate rule and making real democracy in this country. That's kind of our umbrella. But we see a key strategic piece of accomplishing that mission as passing the We the People Amendment. And the We the People Amendment makes clear that artificial entities like corporations don't have constitutional rights, and that money is not speech, meaning that we can regulate campaign spending as much as we need to. And also to provoke discussion and organizing about how to make real the promise of American democracy through constitutional renewal. So we have this one amendment focus that is like our main campaign, but along the way, we actually want to use this amendment effort as a way to spark and provoke conversation and organizing around further democratizing our Constitution, because we actually see this amendment as really it's just step number one. So our principles and values that guide us are a commitment to anti-oppression and solidarity organizing. And what we mean by that is we are in this mess because we have had an unjust system in this country from the very beginning. And there have been movements that have worked to correct that issue, that people have dedicated their lives to. But that is a project that is still ongoing and still needs our understanding that, the United States is not a democracy. It doesn't treat all people equally. We have systems of racism and white supremacy. We have systems of patriarchy and misogyny at play. We have systems that are rooted in class oppression, gender oppression, and homophobia, and all of that feeds into the legal system, the political system, and the economic system, and the current conditions. Our belief is that the solution to that is solidarity organizing in a way that isn't just about protecting you and your own interests, but actually a commitment to justice and protecting everyone's rights and well-being. We believe that that is possible through building coalitions and movement building. So it's not that everybody comes and works on one thing. There are different aspects of the movement, but coalitions come together and put our collective efforts together towards an agenda. So that's why Move to Amend has always been a coalition. And we believe in movement building as really the only way that we have ever achieved any kind of social justice in this country is the result of people's movements that have been rooted in grassroots organizing. All of us who work at the national level, our backgrounds are in grassroots organizing, and we believe that that's where power really gets built, and that's why Move to Amend is structured the way that it is, around local chapters that really are the ones who are doing the bulk of the work in communities to educate people about corporate rule and corporate personhood and how that operates, and also how to get involved in Move to Amend and build this larger movement. We have a dedication to political education because that's an ongoing process, peeling back the layers of the onion to understand how we got to this situation. It didn't start with Citizens United. It didn't start with Trump. It didn't start with the Buckley-Vallejos decision in the 1970s. Actually, where we are now is the direct result of where we started from the very beginning in this country, which was a country that was rooted in denying rights to most human beings and protecting those with property and their property above all else. And so it's not an accident that we've ended up in this situation where property, which is what corporations are, have more rights and protections under the law, according to the Supreme Court, than the rest of us. And so unlearning or learning that history, unlearning the myths we've been told about what our country is and how it's operated in the world and how it's operated for the people who live here is really key to understanding how we can get to the solution in the world that we need. And then political and economic independence as an organization, making sure that we're not tied with any particular political party, and also that we are not tied with wealthy interests that might, at the end of the day, not really seek to support the kind of systemic change and radical, kind of like getting to the root of the problem, is what I mean by radical, solutions that we know that we need, but that wealthy interests might actually not be willing to go all the distance for that. And so making sure we have that independence. So Move to Amend is supported overwhelmingly by small donations. The average donation is $40, and we have thousands of donors, and that's what we feel like is the best way to maintain our independence and our integrity and not be beholden to any one class of people or particular folks. So those are the principles and values that we guide us. Those are the principles that we and values that we ask everyone who becomes a leader in Move to Amend and represents our organization to have a commitment to. So if we're going to talk about amending the Constitution, we should make sure that we understand how to do that, right? And I'm seeing some questions coming through on Facebook. A reminder to the folks on the webinar as well, feel free to type your questions anytime. I'm probably going to take most of them at the end because it's a little bit hard to be looking in 3 different places at once, and I don't want to miss anything. So I'll go back at the end, but feel free to type them in real time so that we can be sure to get them all. And those of you who are on the national team who are tuning in via Facebook Live, feel free to help answer folks' questions or direct people to resources in a more in-depth way than I will be able to during this webinar. So amending the Constitution. There's 2 ways to amend the Constitution according to the Constitution. One is for 2/3 of both houses of Congress, so the House and the Senate, to pass an amendment resolution, and then 3/4 of the states need to ratify any amendment proposal that passes through Congress. The other option, which is not a route that has been done for any of the previous amendments to the Constitution, is for 2/3 of state legislatures to call for a convention to propose an amendment, 34 states, and then still 3/4 of states have to ratify any amendment proposal. So for the most part, Move to Amend is focusing on path number 1. One of the things that sets us apart from some of the other amendment groups is this very question, because different groups have different strategies that they think should be employed. So most of them are focusing on just Congress. There are others who believe that Congress isn't a viable option and we need to go the convention route. Move to Amend, we sort of put ourselves in the middle. We believe that we've never had a successful constitutional convention to amend the Constitution since it was ratified. And so it makes sense to at least start with Congress for sure. And that's what most Americans think of when they think of how to amend the Constitution. It's through the Congress. And so that's where we're focusing our energy right now. Having said that, though, there is a reason why there are 2 options. What if Congress never is willing to act? What do you do? Well, we do have an opportunity to basically go around Congress, which is the Constitutional Convention. And from our perspective, we need to be prepared for that option. We need to be willing to have that on the table, because some of the amendments that have successfully passed through Congress was only able to happen when there was the threat of a convention to kind of force Congress to get their butts in gear and act. And so if nothing else, the threat of a potential convention and the precedent of the states choosing to amend the Constitution without Congress in that is an important piece of what we might need for our strategy. The other thing is, it is the more populist democratic way to amend the Constitution. Having said all that, though, we need to also think about what is the political context that we're in. Right now, we are in a country where a number of state legislatures have very strong, some of them even majorities, but at least strong minorities of people who believe that women really should not have the same rights as men, who believe that people of color should not have protections under the law, or that racism is over and conveniently we should move forward with a white supremacist agenda, or that, our borders should be closed and nobody should come in, or that gay people should be rounded up and, or at a minimum, not allowed to be who they are. And so we live in not just a divided country, but a political moment where white supremacists and Nazis have a good amount of power in this country. In fact, they're occupying the White House, right? And so the context to have a popular, unprecedented coming together and looking at the Constitution makes a lot of people really nervous. Our perspective is, either way, we're going to need to build a movement. We're going to need to build a movement to force Congress to act. We're going to need to build a movement that would successfully amend the Constitution through a convention, and make sure that that's not something that takes us backwards in terms of human rights, but instead propels us forward. And so that's what we're focusing on building, that people's movement. And so we have to be open to both prongs, but the fork in the road, the decision of which route, really, that's not upon us yet, because we haven't built the movement that is powerful enough to do either option at the moment. And so we pay a lot of attention to folks who are nervous about a constitutional convention in the context of some of the states and who's in those state legislatures, and how there are, hateful, racist, xenophobic, homophobic, misogynist people who are in state legislatures. And at the same time, how do we build a country to where potentially, if we need to amend the Constitution, it's actually easier to do, and we can move forward with a human rights agenda. So that's kind of the way that we approach the conversation. It's a lot more nuanced than some of the other groups. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we also don't want to ignore current context. So at the moment, and most of what I'm going to talk about is our amendment that's in Congress, and because 2019, that's really where we'll be focusing, still in Congress. So our strategy, given all that, is to mostly focus on the American people. And that's still overall Move to Amends perspective, that movements are the only thing that actually makes amendments happen, makes sea change happen. And so that's what we need to do. And movements don't come from Congress, movements come from the people. Having said all that, though, 2019 we see as a key year to move forward our agenda in a big way in Congress. And so that's part of what we will be kind of zeroing in on this year. We're still going to do that by coalition building, reaching out to other organizations that are working on issues that are affected by corporate power, which is almost any group that is working on social justice issues. There's a nexus with corporate power. And so that gives us a lot of room to build bridges and alliances. And we also think that it is key that this movement be intentionally multiracial and intergenerational. Both because just the principle of the people who are most affected by corporate rule should be the ones who are sort of leading the agenda. And our read of history is that we've never been able to accomplish something this big without a movement that is multi-generational, intergenerational, and multiracial. And also that doesn't just happen because you say it. That's something that you actually have to put energy, focus, capacity learning strategy into, because actually one of the most effective ways to keep us from moving a human rights agenda forward in this country has been divide and conquer. And so we are incredibly segregated in all kinds of ways in this country, certainly by race, but also age, in terms of who talks to who and who even is able to communicate across these differences. And those are skills that we need to build and we need to put energy into. And so that's a good part of what we do, especially with our leadership. And we will do all this through community organizing, not just activism. So, you know, in 2019 and this century in general, a lot of the political energy is steered towards, you know, online petitions and, you know, showing up at a rally and things like that. And those are important pieces for doing our work, but actually organizing relationships with people, building power in our communities, and across the country is what makes movements happen. So not one-off events, not an online petition, not just on your, you know, one-time calling your Congress member, but building power. And so that's what I mean here by organizing. And so that's the way to get it done. And that's not something that we learn in school, how to build power collectively. It's not something that we learn at work. So again, those are skills that we actually need to invest our time and energy and resources as an organization and as individuals in the organization into doing effectively. And we focus on grassroots organizing, starting with the first strategy that we employed was passing local and state resolutions calling for an amendment. We've done a lot of that, so now we're kind of taking it to the next step to say to our elected officials, okay, we have given you a mandate, we've told you what we want from you, now it's time for you to deliver. And that's, again, part of why, in particular in 2019, we'll be focusing a lot of energy on Congress and our lawmakers. So just really quick, and this is one of the last kind of intro slides, the way that we're structured, we have what we call local affiliates, which are our local groups. And then we have state networks that will build up to be state chapters. And then National Move to Amend is made up of a national board of directors that are located all over the country, our staff team, which is also located all over the country, and then our awesome intern team, which are also located all over the country. So we don't, we are headquartered officially here in Sacramento, California, but at this point we have folks all over, and there's only 3 of us who are situated here. We're a, you know, a remote telecommute operation so that we can cover the entire country. But we're grassroots volunteer-led, and we have been from the very beginning, and that's one of the other things that sets us apart from some of the other amendment groups is most of them are based in Washington, D.C., and are kind of a professional organizing class, and our folks are rooted in social movements and at the grassroots level because we really believe in that principle. So I want to just, so now I'm going to pivot to our conversation about where we're headed in 2019. So first, let's make sure to go through, you know, kind of what we accomplished last year and what the lay of the land is at the moment. So last year we were able to get 66, we ended the year with 66 co-sponsors on the We the People Amendment in the House of Representatives. We also toured the country and had stops in over 60 cities. We had our second ever National Leadership Summit, which is our national conference that we originally were going to do every 2 years, but we're doing it every year now, actually, based on popular demand. And that includes a lobby day in Washington, D.C. We had over 200 candidates sign our pledge to amend, which means they're running for office, and they pledge that if they're elected, whether at the local, state, or federal level, they will use their office to support the We the People Amendment. So if it's at the local level, maybe that's working to pass a resolution calling on Congress to support the amendment. If they're in Congress, that means coming on as a co-sponsor. And if they're at the state level, then they're both pledging to ratify the amendment if they're in office at that time, and also to move it forward and call on Congress as well right now. And then our lead in the House had always been, our amendment was first introduced in 2015 I'm sorry, in 2013. So it was 5 years that we worked with Congressman Rick Nolan from Minnesota, but Representative Nolan retired at the end of last year. And so we worked last year to make sure that we would have a new lead lined up. And I'm really excited, and hopefully folks have all heard this announcement that we were announced at the end of the year, that our new lead going forward is going to be Pramila Jayapal from Washington State. And we're really excited about that because Representative Jayapal is one of the most active and engaged members of Congress that there is. And she's really excited to be a leader on this issue. And so I think that we will be well poised to take this even further because she will be, I think, a lot more active on this than Rick Nolan, who was amazing and approached us first and, you know, led the way, but she's just a much more ambitious and active member of Congress. So we had a number of folks actually say that they wanted to work with us and request that they could be the lead. And in the end, we chose to work with her because we felt like that was the most strategic option for Move to Amend. And we felt like she was the best fit with our culture. So Move to Amend has a strategic plan that we put in place a few years ago. And we did that in the interest of being transparent, and also because one of the big things that people say is, you know, we need to get this done right away. And yet it's a monumental task. And so we basically spent a year working with our local folks, our national folks, and putting our heads together and coming up with a path that we set for how we're going to get this done. There isn't really a playbook for how to amend the Constitution, right? It happens generally like once a generation. So, you know, so most of us who are alive can't, well, I don't know if that's true, but didn't work on a constitutional amendment, right? So we're kind of making this up. Well, and the other thing too is that it's a 10-year plan. And a lot of times folks respond to that with like, we need to get this done faster than 10 years. And I agree with you. On the other hand, we are a long way away from having democratic power with a small d in this country. And so we have to be real about what the conditions are that we're starting from. But the reality is that if we want to do it faster, we still have the plan. We just need to go through those steps faster. And what we found in the now 3 years since adopting our strategic plan is that on some things we're ahead of the curve, and on some things we're lagging behind. And it doesn't mean that, you know, in order to get the amendment at the end of the day, we have to do it exactly like this at this pace. But this is a way to hold ourselves accountable and to be transparent with all of our supporters on where we are at, so you can see. So if you want to read the whole plan, you can find it online on our website. So our goals for 2019, originally our goal was to get 60 House co-sponsors, but we passed that goal at the end of last year, and we've regularly been ahead of the curve on our House sponsorship. So we've upped that goal, and our new goal is 75. So we were at 66 when we ended the year. It's worth noting, though, that a few folks didn't return to Congress, either because they were unelected, but most of it is because they retired or ran for other things. And so we don't have 66 people who were co-sponsors last time who are in the 116th Congress. So we're going to have to get back everybody that we had, because each new Congress, every amendment needs to be reintroduced, and you got to kind of start over to some degree. So we have to get all those folks back. So that's the first order of business. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have to make up the difference. We also want to get our amendment introduced in the Senate. This is one of the goals that we're a bit behind on. It is proving more difficult than we had hoped to find a champion in the Senate, somebody who's willing to step forward. That has a lot to do with how the Senate operates, and that there's just a lot less willingness to stick your neck out, and also to put forward, to just introduce things in general. And so a lot of senators, you know, they're wary to introduce something that they know isn't going to pass in this Congress. So we need to keep working on them and help them understand that what we need right now is leadership. We need champions who are willing to do what's right rather than what they're used to. And we're very close. We did have a senator last year who verbally committed. And then a lot of the problem too is Washington, D.C. is in complete chaos right now. I mean, literally right now, right? The government is shut down, but that is an outgrowth of the whole way that last year worked. And so they're just scrambling around and kind of acting like chickens with their heads cut off, in all honesty, most of the time. So the issue with that senator's office, and I can't say publicly who it is because it's still not solid enough to go there, is that not that they're not interested, it's that it just doesn't feel like as much of a priority as other things. So that's what we have to do, and we're going to continue to work on other offices too, because we don't want to put all of our eggs in that basket until it's a for sure thing. So getting it introduced in the Senate is really key. We are also going to do Pledge to Amend again this year. Pledge to Amend, I think, makes a lot of sense to folks when we're in like a midterm year like we were last year, and a lot of focus on people running for Congress, because then they can deliver on their pledge right away in a very straightforward way. They can become a co-sponsor when they're elected. But Pledge to Amend is not just about focusing on Congress. Pledge to Amend is about focusing on all levels of elected officials. Because again, this is a long-term campaign. We have to think down the road. We have to remember that at the point that our amendment passes through Congress and goes to the states for ratification, most of the people who are in Congress right now might not even, well, people stay in Congress for a long time, but a lot of the people who are ultimately going to be those Congress members might not even be in Congress yet. And so who is most likely to be in Congress later? Well, people who are operating at the state level right now, who are state legislators. And who's most likely to be the state legislators who are going to ratify our amendment? Well, those people are mayors of cities, and they're on county commissions, not across the board, not exclusively, but a lot in a lot of ways. And certainly they are leaders in their community. So getting to them right now, even if it's years down the road before they can officially play a role in passing and ratifying the amendment, is really important. Getting them on our side, getting their commitment, getting them to use their leadership in their community and their clout and their sway and influence for us. And so starting when they're running for local office or state office is important. So this year, there is not a federal election, but there are local elections all over the country. So we'll be focusing on local candidates, and I'll talk more about that later. And then growing our petition signers and our volunteer leaders and our affiliate groups, just continuing to grow. Our petition signers are so key, and I'll talk about how you can get involved with that later, because those people signing our petition are the folks who, that's the very first step. That's probably why most of you are here, because somebody, you found it online, or somebody approached you and asked you to sign the petition, or you came to an event and did so. And that brings people into our database. Then that becomes a pool of people from which to build further engagement as volunteers, as donors, as ambassadors and messengers of our campaign. And so all of us need to help grow the people who have signed the petition. And then we will have our third National Leadership Summit in June. So these are just a couple graphics to kind of show how we're going to build, state chapters, lead organizers, active supporters are the people, communities. So we've done a lot of work to have states call for, the amendment, and we'll continue to do that. 2019, that's not a super big focus, but we'll go back to that in states where that hasn't happened yet, et cetera, and then also Congress. So we kind of have these three prongs of areas where we need to do work. And like I said, in 2019, we're going to be focusing a good bit on Congress, but certainly some on people as well. And this is kind of a confusing graphic. I think maybe we could redo it, but it basically shows, 10 years from when our strategic plan was put in place, puts us to 2025 when we want to see the amendment pass through Congress, and then subsequently it needs to get ratified. And in the meantime, every single time there's a new Congress, it needs to be reintroduced. So that's where we are right now. We need to get our amendment reintroduced. and we need to build that capacity and that momentum. So let's talk about the ways that we're going to do that in 2019. And again, I'm seeing your questions and comments, and keep them coming, and I'll go back through all of them at the end. So like I said, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is our new lead sponsor on the We the People Amendment. It has been House Joint Resolution 48. Our goal is to have that same number again. However, there are new rules or something this time, and we can't earmark it. So we're going to try our best working with her office. Just had a call with them yesterday to try and make sure to time things so that we get 48 again, which means we don't have control over when the amendment is actually introduced. But I'll talk about that, well, next bullet. But we do expect that to be this month. They're already at like 20 some. And that's just after a couple days last week of starting. So we expect it to be this month, and that's kind of what we're planning for. So I will be going to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of February, it looks like, to do lobby meetings. And again, a reminder that our goal is 75 co-sponsors in the House by the end of the year, and we need to get the amendment introduced in the Senate. And our goal is to have 5 to 10 initial sponsors when we do that. So to break this down, focusing on the We the People Amendment, January and February. So we expect it to be reintroduced this month. We don't know the exact timing. That's part of why we're just going to kind of wait to February to do the big announcement. We're going to let it drop, and then we'll do the publicizing of it in February when I and some others from our team and Representative Jayapal's team are working together on that. So between now and when the amendment is introduced, we want to get it introduced with as many initial co-sponsors as we can. And obviously the best folks for that are the people who have already been co-sponsors. So we're working with Jayapal's office to get what's called a Dear Colleague letter, which is the way, the way this works. The lead basically approaches their colleagues and asks them to sign on with their bill. So we expect that we should have that very soon. And then we use that as well, as that's the main thing that an office will ask for. Oh, can we see the Dear Colleague letter and the text and other things like that. So we need to kind of do some of that stuff. We had all that with Nolan, but we need to recreate it with her. And there's a lot going on. So she has bitten off already a lot in the beginning of the new year. As folks might have heard, she is the new co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. She's going to be introducing the Medicare for All bill as well. And so juggling our issue along with all of her other priorities is a factor. So that's part of why we're going to make sure that we do the work with her office helping, but we're not going to leave it to them to recruit back all of the previous co-sponsors. So if your representative was a co-sponsor last time and they're still back in Congress, then we're going to need you to help us contact them before it's introduced, so in the next couple weeks, and ask them to commit to coming on so they can be an initial co-sponsor. And we'll be sending emails to the whole list of kind of how to do that and what you should do to help with that. Then when I'm there in February, we're going to do a briefing for legislative staff. So that would be for new people who don't understand this issue yet. So the new Congress people, of which there are a number in the House. And then we will also be reaching out to anybody who for whatever reason hasn't come on yet. We have some people who have signed the pledge, so we need to get them. So that's kind of our focus as soon as we get it introduced, to bring those folks in, targeting those new House members, targeting the Progressive Caucus just because they're low-hanging fruit, and Representative Jayapal is one of their leaders. Also, the other co-chair, Mark Pocan, has been a co-sponsor of the amendment from the very first time, and so we want to get all of them. And we're going to launch, starting this year, a new campaign where on the 28th day of every month for the 28th Amendment, we will have National Call-In Day. So we're asking everyone to put that in your calendar and be prepared and ready to go with your calls. There's just 3 calls you will need to make. And once you get your House member, then there'll just be 2 calls. So a call to your House member and then a call to both of your senators. And we'll have scripts for all of that and everything. And we're asking that to become a regular thing that everybody who supports Move to Amend does. And then also as part of that meeting, or that time that I'm in DC with Salim, our legislative coordinator, we'll be moving the discussion forward in the Senate, we hope. Although a lot of what we'll be focusing on in January and February is more the House. So we will be letting you know all the different ways you can support that. I can see some questions around particulars, like somebody asked for a list of co-sponsors. I obviously can't rattle that off to you right now, but if you go to movetoamend.org/amendment, you can see the text of the amendment. We've still got the details from last year, so that's going to take you to a page from the 115th Congress, but there you can see a list of who the co-sponsors were at the end of last year. Right now, there are 0 co-sponsors because the bill hasn't been introduced yet. So we'll be providing all of that to you as follow-up on this webinar. So then in March through May, we're going to continue with those national call-in days on the 28th of every month. And then we're going to be preparing for what we are going to call in Corporate Personhood Day, which will be May 10th. May 10th is the anniversary, for lack of a better word, of the Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad case, which was sort of the story is that's the first place where corporations were able to get themselves into the Constitution, making the argument that the 14th Amendment should apply to corporations. So we'll do education around that case and that moment and what that means in a general way. But as far as the We the People Amendment goes, we're trying to gear up for everyone delivering petitions. So the number of people who have signed the petition, however many that is in their district, our petition, to congressional offices that day in districts. So you're not going to have to travel to Washington, D.C. You can go to wherever your closest office is in your state to your, again, mostly House member, although if you wanted to do your senator, that would be okay too. And then if your House member is already a co-sponsor, there's also the potential to hold a rally with them, advertising their support and acknowledging them and thanking them, and also solidifying their commitment, asking for their help in recruiting more of their colleagues. So in order to get ready for that day in May, we need to collect as many signatures as possible so that we can have as big a number as possible of names that we bring in to their office to say, all of these constituents want you to support the We the People Amendment. We also have postcards that you can have people sign ahead of time, so you could also deliver those. And there's the potential for a press opportunity. So as we get to March, we will start to talk about how you can ramp up and gear up for this. But we want to make sure everyone kind of has the lay of the land of how the year is going to go. So I'm telling you the overview now. Then in June, again, we'll have call-in day on the 28th. And we may also do another one earlier because on June 24th is our National We the People Lobby Day in Washington, D.C. So that'll be the last day of our conference, our leadership summit. So everyone who can make it to D.C. will visit their congressional office and senators on that day, and we do lobby training at the conference. It's a very fun and exciting day, and we're going to try and get as many people as possible at the Leadership Summit so that that can be a big lobby day. And then in July and August, we'll do the follow-up on those meetings that happened in DC. And the way this works is, there's the district staff. For those of you who have never done any of this before, you've got the district staff that you need to convince, and then Washington, D.C. staff are the ones who have who really sort of set the policy the most. So that's why we want to kind of get them as much as possible from both angles. Those of us who work at the national level will be going to DC regularly to help amplify what you're doing at the local level. But we're not an organization where everyone's going to be going to DC all the time, and we want to do this in a way that if you can't afford to do that, or if that doesn't make sense for you, or you don't want to use the fossil fuels to do a plane ride, all of that, you can still participate. But we do also need to have the part in DC, because we've never had anyone come on where based on conversations that only happened at the district level. So it's important that we understand that. And anyone who does have the ability to go to DC, it's very huge when a constituent comes from somewhere else in the country to the Capitol. That makes a big impression. And so I just want to plant the seed now that if you're in a position to do that, that will be a monumental help. So in July and August, we'll follow up on all that. And then as folks are probably aware, Congress goes on recess during the month of August, and the Congress members come back to their districts and their states and are more available to meet with you on your home turf. And so we want to make sure that as we have as many meetings as possible during the August recess with either Congress people or their staffers who are back home. And then all of that is to gear up for in September, maybe October, but we're going with September right now, to escalate to actions at congressional offices. So basically what we're trying to do, and in order to do direct action, you can't just start with the most escalated strategy, right? You have to prove that you've been trying to do it in a reasonable, calm, not causing a scene sort of a way, going through the channels. But if by the time we get to September, your Congress member is still unresponsive, then we're gonna up the ante a bit. And we're gonna have congressional actions at their offices. Again, don't have to go to DC, staying in your community or close to home, but really asking, which side are you on at this point? This issue has support from 80% of the public. Every time we put it on the ballot, we've been successful at the state level, at the local level. And so there really is no excuse. No matter what party folks are in or what the makeup is of your community, chances are that the majority support this amendment. And so we need to make them take a position. And so the messaging around it will basically be time's up, which side are you on? It'll be a chance for media attention, and potentially we will have some direct actions, as in sit-ins, people refusing to leave offices until we get an answer, or until they close or whatever. So some of that is still to be determined. That's not until September, but want to build this long runway up to this point so that it really makes sense why we're escalating, because we've given them ample opportunity and they're still refusing to respond. So our top targets will be Democratic Party members, because we want to help make sure that going into the 2020 election, this is a big issue. And we also have seen already the Democratic Party trying to put itself out there as solving these issues, and yet not addressing corporate power in those solutions whatsoever. So what I'm referring to is HR 1, which is the Democrats' first bill. It was all touted. Nancy Pelosi started talking about it last year. And then when it came out last week, what we see is there's a lot of good policy proposals in there, kind of Democratic infrastructure proposals, things that would make our democracy work better. But there's nothing about corporations and the fact that corporations are the ones that actually have the most sway in our government. And the solutions around big money, whether from corporations or other, are really, there's no amendment proposal in there. So none of the policy suggestions that are in HR 1 are going to be, even if they were to pass, which isn't going to happen because the Senate is going to block anything with the Republicans, and that's part of why the Democrats are doing this, is kind of a cynical, well, if we put this forward, we know it's not going to go anywhere, but we can blame the Republicans for that. And so we want to kind of call that out, and also make sure that everyone understands that even if they were able to get those changes, those are subject to the court overturning them, like they have done with other campaign finance measures and other democracy measures around voting rights. Unless we put it in the Constitution, the Supreme Court can undo it later. There is no lasting impact to legislation at this point when the court has so thoroughly been used to decide what is permissible for us to us and our Congress people to pass. And so we need to change the rules of the game in a much more fundamental way than is currently being talked about. So that's part of why we want to target the Democratic Party, because they're going to be talking all about this year, and we want to be able to insert ourselves into that conversation and make sure that it isn't just a glossing of how to bring about democracy, and that there aren't the amendment piece isn't missing from the story. And in particular, the amendment piece that our amendment, right? None of the other amendment proposals address corporate constitutional rights, and they also don't address the doctrine of money as speech in as fundamental way as we do. And so we want to make sure that they understand that really the only solution that has been proposed that would actually solve our issues around corporate power and money in politics is the We the People Amendment. So all of that. However, if you live in a district where you have a Republican congressperson or senator, there's no reason why we can't. I mean, this bill, actually, our amendment has been bipartisan. We do have a Republican who has supported it. And I think more and more we're seeing Republicans realizing that their constituency is pretty frustrated at the fact that they're not addressing both corporate power and money in politics. So that is why. And again, if you're freaking out, remember, this is for 2019. This is a snapshot of priorities. We can't do all the things. And so our lay of the land is we have the most influence at this moment with Democrats because of the way they're trying to set themselves apart. And so let's hold them to that. And then there will be other opportunities down the road to target Republicans in a way that is more strategic than we think it would be right now. So I want to go through some of the other things, and then I'm going to try and get through as many questions as possible. We don't have that much time left in this hour. I wanted to go through, though, and really lay out this path for the year, because we wanted to be transparent and we wanted you to understand what we're doing and kind of see the full big picture. So I already talked about Pledge to Amend. We're going to focus primarily on local races. So that will come in the fall when those kick off. So we'll be doing, a lot of attention on Congress up until the fall. And then we're going to pivot to looking at these local races with Pledge to Amend. And then also by then, pretty much everybody who will be running for president will have declared. And so we can also bird dog those candidates as well. So we have a pledge, and it basically is just saying, I will use my office to support the We the People Amendment. So you can learn more about Pledge to Amend on our website. We will, like I said, be hosting our third Leadership Summit in June. This is an opportunity to network with other Move to Amend folks, to learn both skills and analysis. And then we have a lobby day at the end. Registration will open for that very, very soon. We need everyone to help collect Move to Amend signatures. So we call our petition the Motion to Amend. It's on the front page of our website. And if nothing else, you can help us collect signatures and bring people to Move to Amend. So you can take the petition to work or school or church or meetings that you go to for other issues. You can petition publicly at community events, farmers markets, festivals, in front of your post office, or grocery store, or other community events. So you can get all of those details online as well. And again, we'll be sending this as follow-up so that you don't have to, you can't click these links live, and that's okay. We'll make it easy for you. You can also hold house parties for democracy. That's kind of an ongoing thing. We have a 30-minute introduction to Move to Amend called Legalize Democracy, so you could show that. We'd also be happy to join you if there's somebody nearby from our national team or one of our local affiliate folks to address your guests in person. But if that's not possible, we're happy to do it online through a presentation like this, answer questions, get people excited. This is a great way to get started making as a first step to building a Move to Amend group. So one of the things we'll be asking for on this path to move the amendment forward in Congress this year is to put together, if you are not already part of an affiliate, a group of folks, and we can help connect you with other Move to Amend people in your area, but also you can ask friends to join you in that first step in May, End Corporate Personhood Day, and delivering petitions. And so having a house party a few months before that allows you to kind of kick that off and then get started. Start with a fun event, a social event, an educational event like a house party, and then build your group from there and make your plans for how you're going to go about doing your first action on End Corporate Personhood Day on May 10th. And then we also have, always want to make sure that people know that one of the ways, a really low level, easy way that you can help Move to Amend ongoingly is to stamp all your money. And instead of using your credit card or your debit card, to actually use cash money and stamp it with a message. This is a partnership that we originally did with Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's. We came up with the idea, and so he calls it a billboard, a free billboard. So getting a stamp and getting started stamping money, and that's actually something you could also do at a house party. You could have stamps and people could bring their money, and I use it for like tips when I go out to eat, tolls, things like that. Try to have as much cash as possible so that both the cashier sees it, but then it also carries on. We've definitely had people come to us and say, hey, I had no idea, but I got a bill and I looked at the website, and now, now I'm gonna volunteer and get involved. So you can help spread the word that way. And then in terms of ongoing opportunity that's always there, we have these 4 caucuses that focus on different sectors of people and outreach and organizing with them. So we have an interfaith caucus that works with people of faith, and we have an arts and culture caucus that works with artists and cultural workers. We have an organized labor caucus that works with folks who are involved with unions, and then an educator caucus that works with educators. And so if you belong to any of those groups, you're welcome to be part of our caucuses, and all the details are on our website as well. And it's really easy to plug in. So that's a way that you can get involved in doing national work if you like, if for whatever reason focusing at the local level is not your cup of tea or not a good fit for you. Here are some resources that, again, we can send in the follow-up email, but the Move to Amend petition, making sure that you've signed it and everyone you know has signed it. Our Take Action Toolkit is full of resources and tools, examples of presentations and skits you can do, and graphics you can use, and talking points, and all number of resources on just about everything related to amending the Constitution for Move to Amend. If you want to get started to creating a affiliate group, we have a page on that, the movetoamend.org/affiliate. And then our volunteer page, that's a great thing to fill out if you haven't already. And then you'll get a call from one of our awesome interns that will help plug you in and get you started. But you can that way have a one-on-one conversation to really let us know what you already know and what you want to bring to the table, but also what you're interested in, get your questions answered. And then our Move to Amend education program is an educational program that all affiliates, once they form, go through. And that goes back to some of the stuff I said at the beginning about, peeling back the layers of the onion and understanding how we got into this situation, and also what we mean by being anti-oppression and solidarity organizing. So, and that's a great resource if you work with other activist groups. A number of other folks have used those materials to help do self-education too. So those are free and available for anybody who would find them useful, not just Move to Amend folks. So one of the last things I just want to pitch here before we go to questions is this new kind of campaign program. We're calling it the 28th Amendment Alliance, and we're asking everyone to join the 28th Amendment Alliance. We thought about calling it Army, but then it didn't really sit right. So Alliance, sort of like the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars. And by joining the Alliance, you are pledging to recruit at least 28 people, which is like nothing. But if everyone on our list did that, we would be huge. So 28 people to sign the motion to amend. Pledge to call your House member and your senators on the 28th of every month. and to become a Move to Amends sustainer. We suggest $28 a month. That's how much I give, but we will consider you part of the Alliance at whatever level a month you can give. And then by doing that, we'll send you a starter kit, which will include a t-shirt. So we're gonna have a Move to Amend t-shirt, button, petitions, postcards, and stickers to kind of get you started. So we're asking everyone who's on this call, and this is gonna be an ongoing campaign, if you will join the Amendment Alliance. So I'm actually gonna put that up, and again, understand that those of you who are on Facebook cannot see this, but what it says is, will you join the Amendment Alliance? And your options are yes, or I'm not sure yet. So if you could answer, let us know, will you join the Amendment Alliance? And if you're on Facebook, then go ahead and just answer there in the comments. And I'll give you a few minutes to vote. It looks like most people are saying yes. There's a few of you who are not sure yet. What do you got to lose? Do it. And I think many of you are already monthly donors, so you already got some of that down. But some of you may remember that last year we had a little bit of a shaky moment financially, and we realized that what we really need is everyone to give monthly. And if everybody actually did that, we would be completely stable, and we would not have to worry, and we'd be good to go. So Lee says yes, awesome. Tony says yes. It looks like Sandy says yes, I think. And I can't see the folks who are polling, but 71% of you have said yes. So thank you for that. And we will be following up by email. Fran says yes, awesome. Thank you, everybody. We'll be letting you know how you can join the Alliance and get your starter kit and get started. So open for questions. And it's right about time, right? Isn't Trump going to be talking? Yep, right now. So if you want to jump off, I understand, although I promise not to lie in my answers, and I'm sure you wouldn't get that pledge from him. But I will stick around and answer as many questions. I see a lot of comments as well, so it's going to take me a minute to sort of sort through here. But let me start with the folks on Facebook. I don't see questions. Let's see, Donald asked, what success has Move to Amend gotten to get Bernie Sanders to support the Nolan, now Jayapal amendment, and sponsor in the Senate along with Barbara Lee and Tulsi in the House along with others? So we have met with Sanders' office from the very beginning, and we continue to consider him a top target. However, his key staffer, who she's not the only lawyer who works for him, but she's kind of the head of the legal department, unfortunately isn't a big fan of this strategy because she kind of is in the devil's in the details. What about the unintended consequences of ending corporate constitutional rights? So we're continuing to educate her, but unfortunately that's a major stumbling block. So frankly, we expect that it is more likely that a different senator will be our lead. And in some ways that might be more strategic for us, but it certainly makes sense that Sanders, he definitely talks about this. So basically what's needed is more education, I think, of both the senator and his staff. And we will continue to do that, but one way that folks can help is if Sanders does decide to run then for president, then I think we need to, make sure that this issue is put in front of him as frequently as possible, and that we help him understand why the other amendment proposal, the one that just would overturn Citizens United, doesn't go far enough and is a wasted opportunity. And so we'll continue to do that, but unfortunately, and this happens if the staffers have a tremendous amount of power. And, Senator Sanders has a million issues that he's thinking about, and knowing all the ins and outs and nitty gritty is not something that any one of our lawmakers knows on most of the bills that they're proposing, right? So some of that is educating the staff as well. And then if you know of anybody in Vermont that can make a big difference. But Sanders also is pretty loath normally to, you know, take meetings from folks who are not constituents. We will be doing a barnstorming tour. That's what we call our speaking tours in Vermont in the spring. And part of the reason why is to help build more support and local groups in Vermont to lobby Sanders as constituents. So, I mean, Vermont was the first state that passed a resolution calling for the amendment. We've passed resolutions through almost every single town in their town meetings. So we have the mandate for Sanders, but so far he hasn't been responsive. So we'll keep working, but we're also, you know, prepared to go with a different senator if that's necessary, because, you know, that's what's most important. Okay, let's see. Okay, so what are the strategies in use by Move to Amend to make this a bipartisan effort? Is a question that Douglas asks. So we have continued to, sorry, I'm getting texts as well. We continue to push this issue in conservative communities and progressive communities alike. And we have had, you know, a number of towns that have passed resolutions in conservative places. And we take those to, you know, lawmakers who are Republicans. The reality is, though, that leadership on this needs to come from people who identify as conservatives. So if you have friends who are conservatives who agree with this, and again, most rank and file conservatives actually do, then part of what we need is for them to contact their representatives. So that's a big part of it. And as I said, honestly, in 2019, it feels like we have a lot of work to do to make sure that the Democratic Party does not try to co-opt this issue and make it more watered down than it needs to be. And that's actually what we see is our biggest stumbling block at this moment. And so that's where we're focusing, because you would think that, you know, that would be easy peasy, but the reality is that the Democratic Party is probably our biggest threat at the moment. So we have work to do to make sure that folks who are tied in with the Democratic Party are not falling into that. So that's why 2019, that's where we're going to be focusing our attention. Let's see. All right, I'm seeing a bunch of like comments, which are not questions. So I'm just trying to skip through those and make sure to get to people's questions. And I might not see many here. It looks like a number of folks did jump off. So I also want to understand that. So I'm going to look, a few people have raised their hands. So let me see if you've asked questions in that way. Someone said, have you got a senator who has agreed to file the bill in the Senate? That probably was before I said, but just again to reiterate and remind you that not yet. We have a verbal commitment. We've been working with those staff, and we don't feel like that's a sure deal though. So we're going to keep working on that and also keep working on our other targets. And I should have said this, there are 4 states that have passed ballot initiatives. So the voters have directly called on their Congress members to support our amendment. Those states are Washington, California, Montana, and Colorado. So a lot of our focus will also be on House members, but also senators from those states because they have a mandate from their public. And then there are some other key ones, Massachusetts, senators, Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island is a key target, senators from Oregon, and where am I forgetting? Oh, and also Minnesota, because those, and Ohio, because those are our strongest states as well. Elizabeth Warren, somebody asked, has Elizabeth Warren responded? We have met with her office a number of times. Our folks in Massachusetts also have met with her local, her Massachusetts folks a number of times. We don't have a commitment yet. But I think that, at least not to take the lead, I think that if what we really just need is one person to step forward, because there are actually probably about, at least 5, if not closer to a dozen offices that have sort of said like, well, somebody else takes the lead. So that's the trick. And so that's why we have to keep those calls up and make it happen. Because we just need somebody to feel like they have the cover to stick their neck out first. Let's see. Somebody asks, how will you prevent the groups who are opposed to an amendment proposing convention from sabotaging the work of other groups who feel that an amendment proposing convention is necessary to pressure Congress to act? Well, we don't have any control over the other amendment groups. And in all honesty, we have our own issues with all the other amendment groups who oftentimes are kind of undermining our amendment. So we're not in a position to provide cover for Wolfpack, if that's what you're asking. However, we will continue to say what we have said, which is that we definitely cannot take the convention off of the table. Strategically speaking, that might be the only way that we make Congress act. And so we'll continue to work with any amendment group that supports the amendment language that we're putting forward. It doesn't even have to be our exact language, but at least those 2 principles. We have always pledged that Move to Amend will not support any measure that doesn't fully address all corporate constitutional rights and money is speech. So we haven't had anybody suggest changes to our amendment that need to happen in order to do those 2 things better. And so we feel like our amendment is the best proposal, but it's not so much about, because it's ours, it's because it is the only one that contains those 2 points. So the folks who feel that an amendment proposing convention is necessary, the best way to make it possible for us to work together is to make sure the leadership of those amendment proposing groups actually understand corporate constitutional rights and understand that that is what is needed, an ending corporate constitutional rights, not just money in politics. And so the closer we can get on that end goal, the easier it is to work together. And there are a number of states where we've been able to do that because the local folks have understood that. At the national level, though, I think there's still work to do. So I don't see any more questions. I see some really long paragraphs of a lot of points, but I don't feel like that would be helpful to kind of hash through here. Let's see. Anybody who kind of wants to have, I will say this, I'm not trying to avoid these conversations, but it's sort of this, we're losing folks and kind of getting into particular people's issues. So let's see, are there any Republicans refusing to take PAC money? I haven't seen, that is one question. I haven't seen too much of that. I think that there's a lot of room for that to be pushed and that to be a good headway into making inroads with Republicans who feel like they need to make those kinds of commitments. And certainly there's a lot of education to do, and we're very down to do it for Republicans. So I think that would be a good start, is trying to identify which Republicans are clearly trying to differentiate themselves from the rest of their party that is right now very supportive of big money in politics, which makes it hard, even if a particular lawmaker agrees with rank and file Republicans that there's too much money in politics, the party's position of being in favor of Citizens United puts them in an awkward position. So that's part of our job at the local level, especially if we live in districts where Republicans are representing us, to really push that issue and make them feel as though their voters don't want to see, they're going to potentially lose their seats over taking corporate money and supporting corporate power. And so there's work to do there, and certainly I think some of the work that we're trying to do in Congress this year with the sit-ins and the things like that can involve that kind of a conversation with folks who are Republicans. Absolutely. Let's see. When I call my representative in Congress on the 28th, what should I say exactly? Is there a script? Francesca asked that. Yes, there is a script, but it's also super easy. So every time we send an email asking people to do that, we always provide the information. But basically, once we know the bill number, and we hope that it will be 48 again, all you do is just call and say, I'd like to ask Representative so-and-so to co-sponsor House Joint Resolution 48. and you can add the We the People amendment. That's it. And if we're calling our senators, then we need to say, we are asking you to stand with Move to Amend to introduce a companion bill, that's sort of the key term of art, in the Senate to House Joint Resolution 48. So yeah, we'll have a script on that, and we need to get the bill number before, because that's what they'll ask for in the calls that we're going to make this month to bring back on our co-sponsors from last time. Then obviously we won't be able to give a bill number, so we'll have a script for that as well, although a lot of that work is going to be done by our affiliates who already have those relationships, and national, me and the rest of our team who already have those relationships as well. So all right, I think that it might be time to go find out what's going on with our I don't even know what to call him, with Trump, and or you know, the live tweeting that others are doing if you don't want to actually listen to his voice. And I very much appreciate everyone for being here. We do have a survey at the end that would be helpful if you could fill in. I apologize very much if I missed any questions. So in the feedback, you can let us know if there is anything else that you would like to talk about, and we'd be happy to give you a call and talk to you one-on-one, have a longer conversation. We always make ourselves available in that way. So if you could, please give us your feedback. We'll also send an email after this with this link if you want to jump over to the other news going on right now and do this later. But please do give us this feedback, and then also you can let us know if you'd like to help start a group or if there's anything else that you need from us. And our next webinar will be on February 5th, and the topic will be how to start a Move to Amend affiliate. Let me just make sure I'm not missing any last things. Nope, it looks like we're good. So thank you everyone who, oops, yep, that was the end. Thank you everyone who joined us via Facebook as well. I'm so glad that that was able to work. And if you are tuning into the recording, either the webinar recording or Facebook Live recording, please make sure to also fill out the feedback afterwards. And then let us know if there's any follow-up that you have. And you can also post your comments in Facebook right now, even if we're not live, and we'll catch them and give you an answer. So thanks everyone. Happy New Year. Really looking forward to working with you in 2019. I hope you will join us. Thanks to everybody who pledged to join the Amendment Alliance. And those of you who still aren't sure, please let us know how we can help convince you and bring you in. So have a great night, everyone. We'll see you on February 5th, if not before. And thanks for all you do for Move to Amend. Check your email because there will be follow-up. Have a great night. Bye.